My name is Eliza Boyer, and I'm the Director of Education and Public Programs here at the museum, the Society of Illustrators and Museum of Illustration. Tonight's program was organized as part of our annual competition and exhibition. That's the work which is surrounding you in this gallery and continues on the downstairs gallery below. Open to artists worldwide, thousands of entries are considered by a jury of professionals, which include renowned illustrators, art directors, and designers. The first part of this two-part exhibition features work in the advertising, institutional, and uncommissioned categories. And new to the annual this year is the surface and product design category, which features artwork used on merchandise such as carpets, pillows, rugs, clothing, etc., and can include repeat patterns seen on wrapping paper, wallpaper, and other various textiles. Tonight, we are celebrating that new category, as well as a talented and accomplished group of artists and designers working in the surface and product design industry. Moderating this evening is Malene Barnett. Malene is a cross-media artist and founder of Malene B Atelier, a New York-based art and design practice specializing in fine art, limited edition prints, textile design, and design products. Her work has been commissioned by premier hotel chains, landmark office buildings, and luxury private development firms. A cultural enthusiast and passionate entrepreneur, Malene collaborates with commercial brands and international artisans. She's the author of the Malene B Essentials, the e-guide series, a TEDx speaker, and an industry commentator for TV and radio. Her work has been featured in leading international design and lifestyle publications. Malene was also a judge for this year's annual. I must also add that Malene was the one that brought our wonderful panel together. She has been a pleasure and so easy to work with, and I'm sure that her clients and industry collaborators feel the same way. The second part of the annual, which will focus on book and editorial illustration, will be on view between January 31st and February 24th, with an opening reception on February 2nd. Tickets for the opening are available online. Please join us for drinks in our bar on the third floor after the program and Q&A. If you haven't been here before on a Tuesday or Thursday night, you'll see our sketch night in progress. We invite artists of all skill levels to sketch at the Society every Tuesday and Thursday nights from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. More information about Sketch, about many other programs, exhibitions, competitions, resources, and other opportunities to be involved here at the Society are available on our website. We are also open to suggestions that our members and visitors have for programs, so please stay in touch with us if there's a program you think we should be doing. Thank you again for being here, and now I will turn things over to Malene, who will introduce the panelists for tonight. Enjoy. Thanks.
Thank you, Eliza. Well, thank you everyone for having me here. As Eliza said, I'm Malene Barnett, and I'll be your host for the evening. I'm so excited to be here. And before we get into our conversation, I want to make sure that everyone is here with questions and has their ideas ready, because at the end we're going to have time for question and answers. And you know, my panelists here, we're going to love to share and help you guys get on your journey if creating products is one of your desires. I also want to recognize the ladies on the panel and let you know that they are very accomplished women. We have a range of experience in the room, which is great, but these are also the women that are responsible for a lot of the products that we encounter on a daily basis. And I particularly chose a panel of women today because I want us to be recognized for the work that we've been providing that has so long been overlooked. So here we go. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Judy Ross. And Judy has been in the business for a long time. She knows a lot. And her work is amazing. She works abroad in India and produces a luxury line of textiles. Her work has been seen in many major hotels, such as like Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, the W. You know, I'm going to allow Judy to really tell you more about her, but I want you to make sure that you check out all of our websites and our Instagram. So on each slide, you'll see our information. So feel free to follow us and read more about us after. But I'm going to give the mic over to Judy now.
Yeah, so anyway, hi, I'm Judy Ross, and this is some slides that I put together. I also brought a tiny little bit of show and tell that I can open up. But, you know, I studied to be a painter. I think early on when I was a kid, I was drawing all the time, and I ended up, I lived in Queens, and I ended up not going to Halsey, whatever the high school was in the area. I applied to Art and Design High School on 2nd Avenue, and at the time it was a very, very good, I mean, I think it has come back again as a very good art high school. So I tried out and I got in, and the funny thing was that, you know, we'd always have to have lunch at school, and then we were on this kind of fenced-in terrace for lunch because they wouldn't let us out. They knew that we'd go to Bloomingdale's and never come back. So, but anyway, so I studied there, and then I did a lot of different arts, illustration, graphic design, everything. And then I ended up going to a fine art college. I went to Queens College because at the time I wasn't in the mood to take a school loan out, and Queens College had an amazing art department. So I went there, and then my father, who was in the industry, in the textile industry, kept saying to me, Judy, you should learn how to make textile designs because you can make money that way. You know, he was afraid I was going to get out and be a painter and not make a living. So I did a year at FIT. So I learned how to do colorings and textile designs. So anyway, I get out of school. I did do textile designs. I did paint, but at the time there was a big movement for painting on fabric and making art to wear. So I kind of segued into that, and I started painting fabric, making clothes. I was in Macy's and Bloomingdale's windows with Anna Sui and Betsy Johnson, and I was doing all these great, like they would call me up and say, Judy, we want to do a Mexican theme. So I'd go down to Orchard Street and I'd buy T-shirts, and I'd make, you know, some Mexican fiesta design, and they'd be in the windows of Macy's, and Anna Sui would do her thing. And so that's how I started. And then I was, you know, a lot of my friends were working in India because people were making things there. And I decided I really wanted to go to India. So my friend said, here, this is how you make a shirt. You know, it's this dimension. This is how you do this. And at the time, again, it was this very much about pattern and making sequin tops with, you know, labels on it. So it was just so easy for me. And so I went to India, and I became like this really successful designer there because I would come up with these ideas of a textile design with an embroidery. And, you know, so I had this big career going on, but, you know, I was missing my own voice. So one time when I was there, a friend of mine, actually somebody in the art world was wearing this beautiful scarf that had been embroidered. It was this guy, Robert Kushner. He was a pattern painter at the time. And I said to him, where did you get that? And he said, I got it in India. And I said, I have got to do that. That's what I want to do. So when I was in India, I asked around to friends, and I found out the best place is Srinagar, Kashmir. So I went to the embassy, and I spoke to the embassy. They knew a lot of the vendors that would come down with these beautiful shawls. So they introduced me to somebody, and I said, look, Bashir, I'm going to give you a drawing. Can you make me a scarf? And, you know, so he made the scarf for me and brought it to my hotel. And I looked at it, and it was something like this. I can show you one. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to send you like 10 designs. And he's like, great, you can come stay on my houseboat, you know. And so we figured out this whole thing. He was going to make a production of about 300 pieces or something. I went back to New York. I made all these collages and drawings, sent it to him, spent a month in Kashmir, came back and called up people, got a big show at Saks Fifth Avenue, Women's Wear Daily. And then I was on my career of, you know, being a scarf designer. So this is just one of them. You know, I did small scarves and I did big shawls, you know, and you can see the back. I mean, it's all done by hand. And so for about 6 years, I was a scarf designer and I was traveling all around the world. I sold in Paris. I worked for Christian Lacroix, for Ungaro. I made scarves for them. And it was great. And then at one point, you know, it became this idea that I had to become a scarf designer. Like I had to make other kinds of scarves and all this. And it wasn't really my thing. My thing was about the embroidery and about the product and not about, you know, sort of diversifying and doing all these different kind of scarves. So at that time, the home market was coming up. And this is about 1995. So I said, you know, I've said to a friend, maybe I should make pillows. And so she's like, yeah, make some pillows, you know, and I'll put them in my store. So it was Segerson Morrison at the time, this really cool shoe store. So I put together all these pillows and they started selling the pillows. And then I got a connection to call up Barney's and I went to Barney's. And then, you know, my friend is like, well, you're going to have to make more than a couple of designs, you know. You're going to have to make a lot of colors. And so I ended up, you know, just making a big line of pillows. And then I was selling at Barney's. And then I was doing trade shows. And then, you know, the home market was where I really felt comfortable to be. And it was a great segue. I can just show you. I brought just a couple to show.
So Judy, what we're gonna do is
should
before
I-
you
should
show,
we move on?
yeah, I want to
Okay.
get everyone's intro, just a few minutes. So
Oh, right.
everyone
Sorry.
has
I was I just
because
like,
we don't want to give away everything because we're going to
Yeah, yeah.
talk about a lot of terminology things that maybe some of the audience doesn't
Yeah.
know. And so, Jen, just gonna
Okay.
just give me a little bit about yourself and you know what your craft is.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Orkin Lewis. So I started out as a textile designer after RISD, and I went to school at Rhode Island School of Design, and I studied textile design. And I worked in the industry for a long time, and I started out as an artist, and then I became a stylist, and I was putting together lines that we were selling to manufacturers of print design. I was buying from studios, buying art from artists, and getting them printed and having them manufactured. But after a while, I just wanted to do my own work. So I phased out of that, and I brought my son up for a while. And then really just about 8 years ago, maybe, I started doing more illustration. And 5 years ago, I started my sketchbook. And I started doing that every day for 30 minutes a day, and it just sort of developed my style, and I started selling things. I started selling artwork and licensing artwork, and I got an agent 3 years ago, Jennifer Nelson, and that's really my story.
Okay, thank you,
so
Jen.
here.
And so Vicky's also an illustrator. And so Vicki, just tell us a little bit about what you do and you know some of your clients.
So I'm Vicki. I'm an illustrator, and I also work as a designer during the day. I graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University from their Communication Arts Department, which is basically illustration. And I've been working as an illustrator for about 8 years now. And I think that in the past few years, my work has definitely become more focused on surface design. I've always been very drawn to decorative arts. I also spent some time working as a textile designer, so that has all kind of shaped my work and also my outlook on illustration. And that's about it.
Okay, thanks, Vicki. And Jill?
I'm Jill Malik, and I also started out as a painter like many other people here, and subsequently I engaged in graphic design for many years in corporate companies, and I worked in smaller print media designing advertising and marketing books and point of sale. I worked in a retail apparel company, and I then took a job as an art director for Starwood, and I married an architect closer at the same time, and I started thinking more about merging the world of graphic design and interior design. And I wanted to do something completely new where I could impact environments. So that's where wall covering came in. And I didn't know really anything about wallpaper at the time. But interestingly enough, there were a small crop of artists turned designers, turned wallpaper designers, specifically in Brooklyn, that were starting to, do this craft. And so I took people out to lunch and I kind of learned the trade that way. And I started doing design shows, and I slipped completely into that world, and that's my world right now.
All right. Thank you, Jill. So this last page, just so you know, that's all our contact information, and feel free to write it down. So let's begin. So now I want everyone to take us back to the beginning, because I want to think about that day when you said to yourself, I have all this artwork, I have these ideas, now how do I turn it into a product? Okay, so the first step is, how do you find your inspiration? Because, there's so many sources to be inspired by. And for me personally, I travel the world and I look at my life experience, my cultural heritage, and then I start with a sketch. But I want to hear from Vikki. You do a lot of illustrations, and your illustrations really cover a gamut of subject matters. But how do you come up with those ideas?
Well, really everywhere. I think that for me, at least, keeping a sketchbook is very important, because you never know when you're going to see something inspiring or think of an idea. And I have a really bad memory, so if I don't write it down, I won't remember.
So you said one key is for you to write it down.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
That would be really great. Do you keep a rolling diary of different ideas?
It's kind of just in there with my drawings, just
So that
whatever the next page is.
Okay, that's a good tip, because what happens is, as creatives, we're constantly thinking, oh, that would be nice, and oh, I want to do that. So that's a good tip for many people, to just write down those ideas, don't throw them away, and you never know, you may come back to it years later.
And also just quickly sketching. Another thing that is just very inspiring is drawing itself, because it's kind of like meditation in that it forces you to slow down and really consider your environment and also whatever it is you're drawing. And when you're kind of looking that closely at something, you are bound to find something in there. Also, in the process of drawing, there's a lot of happy mistakes. A lot of things happen because, you screw up and you realize you could turn this into an idea, or it kind of looks like something else. So that, and also now that I live in the city, I try to go to the Met as often as possible, because you can, obviously it's an endless source of inspiration. You can really just draw in there for a whole day. So you think it's very beneficial to change environments to be inspired? Yeah, and I was going to say nature next, but I'm not really in nature as much. But, whenever I am, it's always very inspiring, just the shapes and colors and forms that you can find there.
And so, Vikki, are you actually using pen and ink? What are your mediums that you're using?
I use watercolor, but I use a very limited palette. Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for me, the drawing is the most important part. So, color takes a bit more thought from me. So I'm completely okay with leaving that to, a later stage in Photoshop, where I can make a million changes. But drawing is definitely the most important part, which is why working monochromatically for me is very helpful. It also is helpful when I'm working with a client and they want to change the whole color scheme or an alternate version. It's very easy to manipulate the color from a drawing that's monochromatic, because a lot of the information is in the value. So that works for me.
That's very good to know. Working monochromatic, I never thought about that before, because I know many of us on the panel were all about color all the time, and to even think that, oh, maybe I should kind of work monochromatic or black and white, that'd be a great idea for us to incorporate.
Yeah, that's
I always work black and white.
Oh, you do?
So you work black and white as well,
Yeah.
too. So Jill, so you use the computer and do you paint as well? Tell us about how your process and what inspires you. Because your designs are very graphic.
They are very graphic. I use a combination of sketching and I use photographic elements a lot in my work. And for me, repeated patterns are really the bread and butter of what I do. So the computer as a tool is very useful in making sure everything is lining up perfectly, you know, top and bottom and left and right. Aside from everything lining up perfectly, when you create patterns, you want everything to have a soft, seamless flow to it. So if you want to, you know, have miles and miles of wall surface in a hotel, for example, it can't be overwhelming or overly busy. So the computer for me is a useful tool in getting quick renderings done and really understanding how my pattern, when in repeat, is going to work.
Mm-hmm. So talking about product now, Judy, since you design multiple products from pillows, rugs, scarves, do you think about the product first before the artwork, or is it about the artwork and then you apply it to the product?
I mean, it kind of depends. I mean, I would have to say, like, first of all, a lot of my work stems from, or designs sort of have this longevity. So they might start out as a pillow, and then they might start out as a scarf, and then be made into a pillow, and then into a rug, and then into a wall hanging. So I think the thing that comes into the play is the scale, and that kind of might change. The scale might change. I mean, even the rendering might change because, for instance, I did a collaboration with Garnet Hill, and we did a lot of products like towels and bed covers, and the resolution on an embroidered pillow is not the same as the resolution on a printed linen. So you can get much more detail. So I had to go back and rework designs, in the computer, or sometimes even redraw them because, I could show more texture now. I could show all these things. So, things kind of change.
So again, it just really depends on the product, because what happens is if, like someone like myself, I'm designing a lot of carpets all the time, so I'm constantly thinking of that square, that rectangle. So, if I know what the surface is, and I know, 9 times out of 10, I know what the inspiration is, but I know pretty much it's going to be a certain size. So my mind is like kind of programmed to think that way. But I also understand too, like Judy says, that we create these patterns, but they have many lives to them. So it may start as a scarf, as Judy says, but then it could be translated to a pillow, and that artwork could live for a very long time. Jen, now your paintings are very colorful and whimsical, and they're applied to many services. So how do you go about with your design process and developing your illustrations specifically for a product?
Right. There are 2 different ways. So I have my personal work, which is the sketchbook, or sometimes my sketchbook is just on flat paper if I feel like doing that. But I'll just do whatever I feel like painting. And then if it's good enough, I give it to my agent, and she'll shop it around. And then someone might apply it to a tea towel or a pillow or a card, any kind of product. And then I also have clients who come to me and they want something specific. So I just recently did a round puzzle. So I had to design it within the 23-inch with a 1-inch border, and it had to have something on the top. We talked about exactly what they wanted, and I designed it that way. Or I did some vases that were shaped like houses. So I had the client gave me a template. A template. So I painted it exactly in the template, so they were able to make it that way. So 2 different ways of working.
Okay. So, Jen, since sometimes you're working with clients where you're passing off your artwork and then they're translating it on product, so how important it is for, say, an illustrator or a painter to actually know the whole textile design language? You know, for someone who's just starting and they're like, oh, I really don't know what a repeat is. You know, what would you suggest?
I rarely do a repeat. Rarely do one. I can't even remember the last time I did a repeat, honestly.
But that's good to know because there are many artists out there that they're terrified from designing product because they don't know how to do a repeat.
Sometimes for, you know, we do the shows like Surtex and Blueprint and those kind of shows that we're selling to the clients. So if it's something that I think could be for a notebook cover or for a fabric, I'll do a fake repeat. So I just sort of plop it around and make sure it looks like I'm repeating. And that way, you know, they can imagine what it would look like that way. And then they can do it themselves. So, yeah, because it takes a lot of time to do a repeat. And a lot of times it's not necessary. And there's different kinds.
Yes,
Right. There's a lot of different kinds, and it can get complicated. So there's no need to do it until it's needed. Right?
It's very true.
Yeah.
You know, if you didn't study that textile language, the repeats, half drops, you know, all that stuff, it does become complicated. But also understand, too, that there are softwares out there to help you.
Yeah.
I actually use a textile design software called Point Carré. I don't know, Jill, which software are you using to...
I use my brain.
You use your brain. Well, the brain is always reliable, so... And Vicki, do you use anything? Do you do any repeats? Photoshop. Okay.
Yeah,
now
I use that too.
you
And Illustrator.
Okay, Photoshop and Illustrator, and we know, Jen, you stay away from repeats.
But when I do my fake repeats, I do it in Photoshop.
Okay, Photoshop is the other software. And
I
Judy,
don't even use Photoshop and Illustrator.
So what do you
The
use?
Dinosaur.
So
She really uses her brain.
No, I use like freelance.
so Judy has an assistant.
I know. I could learn it, but I feel like I don't
The mic, please.
want to.
Here.
I just like to draw and paint, so I don't want to learn that
And
stuff.
you see, and that's what I want to hear. So for those of you who that's what you want to do, focus on what it is you love.
You can
don't
find
have to
people
learn
too.
everything.
I mean, I have to say it's challenging. When I did my license with Garnet Hill, I had to sit there with somebody and go, move it a little that way, move it down that way. I don't like the scale. Let's change the, but I wanted to stick to the drawing part and the process more of all of that. So
Very understandable. Sure, Jill.
Because I make repeats all the time, and sometimes my patterns, if they're converted from a residential to a commercial printer, sometimes the specs are different. So sometimes the printer will change the size without me knowing, and I personally will notice those details. So I do think it's important, if you can, to familiarize yourself with that language, because everything is in the details, and just a little tweak can completely offset your work, I think.
It's very true. It's very true. I agree.
Well, I am going to say that because I was in textiles for many, many years, I do know what a repeat is, and I know what it should look like. So I think it is important, though, to have it balanced in the right way. So even if you're not technically doing it correctly, it needs to look right.
Go ahead.
no, and I have to say, I do, after many years of having to work with freelancers, I do, thank goodness, know the language now so that I can direct, because, without knowing that. And I do always say that you should take it off the computer and print it out. I mean, I'm always making my staff like, wait a minute, can we print that out and look at it on the floor? Like, can we, because you can get lost in the whole thing. And it's true, those things can look fine on the computer. And then all of a sudden you print it out and you're like, wow, that is not what I thought I was looking at. So it's like.
Yeah. So now we have our ideas. We understand the process of how we're designing. Now, what's the next steps? We want to make this into something, So, and I think that's a challenge for many artists and designers. We have these ideas, but how do we actually turn it into a product? So, Jill, you work directly with wallpaper manufacturers.
Yeah.
So before you said to yourself, okay, I want to make wallpaper, right? Now, what were some of the steps that you took in order to find those partners?
Well, like I said, I really didn't have any experience at all. When I first started out, I didn't know anything about wallpaper. I just knew that it was an interesting medium for me, and I thought I could translate my skills, my graphic design skills, into that as an art form. So what I did was I took out different people to lunch. I took notes.
She basically bribed them. Okay.
And I found that they were unusually generous with their time. And I was very touched by that. And then I also worked with printers who kind of schooled me when they really didn't have to. You know, they were working with larger, much more established corporate companies at the time, and they took the time to literally, you know, even teach me repeat sometimes because I didn't know anything about that. And, you know, I was lucky to find patient vendors, and that was my process, and that's how I learned.
So, Jill, you said you took out people to lunch. I want to know, what kind of people did you take out?
Just different young designers who were just starting out in the field that I was inspired to start. Yeah, so I took them out for coffee or for lunch and just asked them who they were working with, what vendors, and a lot of times they were very generous with their time and shared information, and that's really how I did it.
I think people have a misconception that if you ask another fellow designer in the industry for information such as manufacturing, that they won't share. Do you find that to be true, ladies? Because I think what happens is, you know, I've been in the industry like Jill and Judy and Vicki and Jen for many years, and some of the vendors I found is just by asking. And so I encourage you all to just ask people that you feel that are in similar line, or maybe not. They just may know. So that's great that you did that to get started.
Yeah,
and
even you and I have shared vendors.
Exactly. And you're still working with them to this day. Some of them, most of them?
Yeah.
Okay, and see, and it's all about building a relationship. You said some key points that you met patient vendors.
Yeah.
And I think it's very key when you're looking for a manufacturer to, one, be upfront about where you are in your business. It's okay to say, hey, I'm just starting out. This will be my first project, and I'm not able to invest in a lot of product. You know, this is going to be a small quantity business, and allow them to say, hey, I want to work with you, or say, no, I don't. Simple, right? And so, like Judy, I know you source overseas, which is a totally different, and because Jill, you're manufacturing here in the U.S.,
all
correct?
local, yeah.
All local. And Judy, you're working overseas, so, you know, what happens now, this was a while ago, you were able to go to India and you were able to, you know, ask around. Do you find that now with the power of the internet and, you know, social, how would someone go about sourcing, you know, this idea overseas? And before even telling me that, particularly, why did you go overseas? Because everyone has different reasons. Because I believe that you should work with the people who make your product the best.
Right. Well, that's it, right? That's it right there, because,
okay.
Well, again, like I said, I saw that shawl that Robert Kushner had on, and I said, where did you get that? And he said, cashmere, and it was a rose embroidered. And, you know, so I was working in India, so I could go about asking, and, you know, I went through, you know, the embassies and through friends, and turns out my friend was going out with this guy whose father was the ambassador to India. So he was the one that told me, oh, I'm going to talk to the Kashmiri guys that come in all the time with their shawls. And he hooked me up. And I stayed with that guy for about, I would say, 10 years. And then, you know, he couldn't keep up with the way my business was growing. He was a little too homegrown. So then I had to ask a whole new bunch of friends, does anyone know anyone that's, because my guy is good, but he's not strong enough in business, and I'm getting bigger orders and things are, you know, getting really successful, and he's not following it. So then, funny enough, 3 people gave me names, but then somebody just approached me random on the internet. hi, my name is so-and-so. I see you make these kind of pillows. I can do it for you. And I tried him, and he was the son of this man who was, didn't speak English, but he had gone to business school. And I've been working with them for about 18 years now. So, and they're great. And, we love each other. And, the thing that I say is I love working with these people because I'm working with a family who's then farming it out. And it's not, it's not a factory thing. And it feels like family. I've gone there. My kids have met them. I don't go that much anymore now because it's a long trip, and I just, it's a long trip. Yeah, so I'm due for a trip. I haven't been there in like 7 years, but we still talk a lot and all that. But I think more now, people reach out through the internet, and that you can find out so much of that stuff on the internet.
Yeah. With social media, websites, there's so much now where you could do Google searches for the exact product that you're looking for, and then a line of manufacturers will come up. And I understand you get all this information, but then it's like, okay, well, what do you do with it? Email them. And I have a thing where I email at least three manufacturers, and then see who comes back and what do they have to say. Would you ladies agree or have anything to add on that when it comes to communicating with vendors? Whether it's domestic or overseas, the language or the lingo is pretty much the same. Jill, anything to add on that?
For domestic versus overseas?
Yeah, the communication. Because what happens is the mic, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, people solicit me all the time and ask me.
People solicit you now, right? But this is for someone who doesn't have a name, who's just starting. You don't get the solicitation right off the bat. I get solicited all the time as well, but that didn't happen until I started the business. And so before you start, no one wants to talk to you because you have no business. So in order for us to communicate, what are some of those tips, like advice would you give the audience on how to communicate with them to encourage them to want to work with you? Because you were able to find patient vendors and they held your hand.
Yeah, I can't really speak to that. I don't really know what I did to woo them necessarily. I think, I'll say this in general. I think artists and designers are having more and more of a voice in the industry. And I think vendors realize that they can be very powerful, and larger companies want to work with them. And so I think in my case, my first printer maybe realized that there are these smaller designers that are coming up in the industry, and the industry's changing, and it would behoove them to kind of work with me and nurture that, because we're going to be successful. So
yeah. And so then what about for those who say, I have all this artwork, but I really don't want to manufacture on my own? So Jen, what has your experience been like? Because that's not part of your business, really, right? You don't manufacture.
No, not at all. I'm not interested in doing that. So.
And tell us why.
I'm terrible at that. I just would never follow up, and I don't like sending things out. I don't like to solicit myself or to, blindly send, look for the art director's name and send out the piece and hope that they get back to me. It's just not part of something that makes me happy, and I like to paint and I like to design, and that's it. So I have to do a little bit of it, but not very much. So it was great to get an agent to do that for me.
And now, Vicki, you also work with different you work with retailers and manufacturers, so you're not involved in the manufacturing process either.
No.
So tell us more about why you chose not to go down the manufacturing route, rather work directly.
Like Jen said, it's a time thing. It just gives me more time to actually make work, which is what I want to focus on. I'm not that interested in, and I probably would be very bad at it. So yeah, it's just that, focusing on what I want to do.
Okay, so everyone, and it's good to understand and know exactly where you want to be in this business, because like Judy's working overseas versus Jill, who's domestic. Jen has an agent, and Vikki, you do it on your own. You don't.
Yeah.
You're getting the work on your own, and you're painting all day. I just have this vision of you painting all day, and then people are calling you like, "Oh, Vikki, I just need this for this book cover."
Sometimes, actually, a lot of like clients have approached me and said that they found my work on Pinterest, which was surprising because I have an Instagram, I have a Tumblr, I have a website, but I think Pinterest is, a lot of people are looking at that. And yeah, most times they'll just come to me because they saw like something of mine from like somewhere online.
Okay.
So that's very important.
So now that you have manufacturing set up, okay, that's like a big major part in developing a product, and you go through the process of having a strike-off sample, which is the first sample that you get after your design has been made. You approve it, you're ready to go into production, or don't approve it, you're right, that's true, it happens a lot, because sometimes we have to go through many, many rounds of strike-offs to get it perfect. But you have your product ready, and now it's time to sell. You know, we have these ideas, and an idea is just an idea if it just sits in your house. It's not a business, and it can't become top selling if it's just sitting with you. So how did you decide on the different distribution channels? So Jen, you work with an agent, right? And so did your agent decide on which stores or which retailers or which manufacturers? Tell us how that process of deciding where your products were going to be.
That's not exactly how it works, because it's depending on who I'm selling it to, and they're distributing it.
Okay.
So if I did something for Anthropology, it's in the Anthropology store. Did something for a card company, they sell it to who, you know.
So well, Anthropology is your distribution channel. So did your agent decide that, you know what, we're going to focus your work for the Anthropology type?
She'll, at the beginning when we first started, she asked me who do you want to work with and who are your dream clients, and so we went through those. And then there are other ones also. She'll show my work to everybody. She might say, who do you not want to work with? You know, there might be someone like that. So it runs the gamut. Anthropology and Kate Spade are really known, exciting brands, and then there are lots of places where I sell that you never heard of. I try to see what the quality of the work is first, of their production. Sometimes I've made mistakes and I get it and I'm not in love with it, and then I won't sell again. But I prefer to go with the clients where I just love the product and they do a beautiful job.
So I think it's really good that you had an idea of where you wanted your work to be, because I think that's important, you know, to think about. You create these patterns. Where do you want it to be? Who do you want buying your work? And create that list. So for you, it was Anthropology, the Kate Spades of the world. And, you know, Vikki, you have some similar clients. So your collection, which is right in the back, which won the award, right? You won the gold medal in surface design for that. Yeah. Your collection with Anthropology, at the end, you could check it out. But how did Anthropology find you for this? Or did you approach Anthropology? Did you say, I want to be in Anthropology?
I never said that, but I had worked with them before. We had done like a calendar a few years back. And a few other things, pillows and like PJs, things like that. So with the tent, it was actually, they came to me because I had done 2 pieces and they wanted to license it. They thought it would be good for a children's bedding collection, and I'm really happy with how like they utilized the illustrations. You know, they really kind of took advantage of the size of the tent, I think. And they did like a shaped pillow, which I think was really cool.
So Vikki, do you strictly work with, say, large retailers like Anthropology? Or if there's someone in the audience who has an idea, would you illustrate for them?
Yeah.
And so then they can manufacture? Because it's good to know there's different ways to, say, work with an illustrator like yourself who does illustration and surface design, and that you're not just only focused on working directly with retailers. So tell us about that, like, because that's also another form of distribution for you. Do you work with smaller, you know, vendors, and you could share some of the experience with that too?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people approach me with all kinds of like different things. And if I'm like interested in it, I'll definitely take it. Even if they don't pay that well, if it's something that I think that my work could be applied to in an interesting way, I'm all for it. Like right now I'm working on a board game, actually, like the art for it, and I've never done anything like that. And it's a completely new experience because like their design team is completely different than Anthropologie's. So I'm learning a lot about board games. Yeah, so it's a new experience, and you learn a lot from like every different project.
That's good. And so Judy, your distribution channel, interior design market, both residential, commercial, and hospitality. So when you started your business, did you decide that, okay, I'm going to focus on residential and interior design? Like, tell us how you decided, you know, to where you wanted your distribution to be.
Right.
Well, when I started with the pillows, which was about 1995, I mean, at that time, it was really about stores and, you know, Charivari and like, you know, Barney's and all the mom and pops all over the, you know, the U.S. and that. So that was my, you know, aspiration was to be in all the best specialty stores. So, you know, I would do trade shows. And that was the way that I got trade shows. And then, you know, you were in Barney's and people would see you in Barney's and then they'd call you up and all that. But then, you know, that kind of shifted. And then all of a sudden the whole home market became big and designers became big. So then all of a sudden you would have the designers coming to you. And then, you know, that was a big market. And then from the designers, it went into like, you know, the whole idea of hotels and that. So, you know, my arena went from like wholesale to trade, which is when you deal with designers, then to, you know, also retail, the people, you know, then the computer internet came in and then all of a sudden I was dealing with retail too. So I had every sort of platform, and that's where I work with today. You know, I work with designers, hotels, retail customers, still some wholesale, but not as much as it used to be.
So for someone starting out, Judy, you know, understanding that you have evolved into these 3 different categories, where would you suggest that they start understanding the market the way you do now?
Well, I think one market that's really big now that I'm channeled into a bit, but sort of I'm on my own little path is, you know, the idea of these sites like Etsy or starting your own site and actually selling on the, you know, Instagram or somehow, you know, getting an audience to your website. There's also so many of these sites now, and I can't remember their names, but if you email me, I can put together a list where they will take your illustrations and make product for you. And then, yeah, there's a bunch of them, Lollipop or... yeah, and then, you know, I have a friend, Trey Spiegel, who was in the graphic magazine world, then became a painter artist, and now he does so many collections with these kind of like I'm amazed when I see these jumpsuits that he's made, and I'll be like, Trey, how'd you make that? And he'd be like, I just went to this website and I gave him the thing, and now they're making me T-shirts and jumpsuits and, you know, postcards and so and they can also sell the work for you. So there's like a lot of great ways you can even just, if you have this idea, you could try it out, you know, and I think that's really cool.
It's the beauty of the internet these days. And so, Jill, you're also on the high-end interior design world. Mm-hmm. But when you started, did you decide that's where you wanted to start?
No. I mean, I didn't really have a clear vision. I was really just trying to learn the trade when I started. And I fell into more residential design because it was easier to manage at that point. And it was really when I first got when I first got my large hotel job.
Ooh,
yeah, and then you realize that there's volume, and that's really where my focus is right now. But I still do a lot of residential. But I wanted to just say another way to get your product out is trying to form collaborations with people, and that's something that I do a lot of right now. And the way you can do that is identifying different designers or different people that are experienced in a trade that you know nothing about, and adding your surface design to that. And because a lot of collaborators need artwork, and so it's a great way to cross-market and learn different trades, and make yourself have more of a range too.
Yeah, and expand your distribution.
Well, I collaborated with different interior designers. I collaborated with another interior design company to create children's wall coverings. I worked a lot with one interior design company who was always using one of my patterns, and they always asked me if I was going to come out with children's wall coverings, and I said, I don't do that, I'm not interested. But then I realized maybe it could be an interesting niche because there isn't that many out there. So we've been together now since 2013, and it's been very successful because we both add something that we don't have on our own. And then I collaborated with another company called Visual Magnetics last year that creates magnetic textiles, and it's a completely different substrate that I'm not used to working with. And they wanted to use my artwork for office patterns because they were finding a need for it, but they don't have an in-house artist or designer to do that. So it's an interesting way to get your work out there.
No, it's very true, Jill. I mean, even with Jill's business, you don't just manufacture. You actually do custom designs.
Yeah.
Where you're not manufacturing. And that's also another option that, again, if you're not interested in manufacturing, you really just want to focus on the art, you don't have to. And I think that's key, with this conversation to understand that. Does anyone have anything else to add about distribution or any other tips or, experience that you'd like to share? Anyone you should not work with? Stay away from that retailer or no?
I have some experience with working with larger retailers, and I think that it is a great way to get your name out and attach your name to a big brand. But there are some setbacks to it for sure. I mean, the paperwork, I'm sure maybe your agents deal with that, but the paperwork that you have to do, you really jump through hoops a lot of the time, and the profit margins do tend to be much smaller. But it is a wonderful way to get your name out initially.
Yeah. So now the other challenge, especially when you're making your own product, is deciding what's your business model. Am I going to inventory the collection, or am I going to be made to order? And I want to hear the pros and cons. So Jill, since you have the mic in your hand, tell us more. Do you inventory your wallpaper, or is it made to order? And tell us the difference.
I do both, depending on the popularity of the pattern. For patterns that are moving quite a bit, I will inventory them, and then for ones that are moving a little bit slowly, I'll do made to order.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Judy. Judy.
Do you do digital or is it printed?
The majority
or both?
of my collection are hand screen printed, but this past year I came out with a digital line, so I can customize more and work on larger scales.
Right. Oh, that's good. I personally love the printed line of.
So Judy, well, since you have the mic, tell us more. So do you inventory, or do you do made to order, or is it a combination?
I have to inventory for a couple of reasons. One, because they're hand embroidered. So if I were to just rely on the fact of making things to order, I would have nothing to sell half the time. So I really invest in, and also when I started, I would do these trade shows. So I would do a trade show in August, and they would want the goods by the end of October. So they had them before Thanksgiving and Christmas. So especially that crunch show in August, I had to make and project, and it was always like just a arbitrary, I had to have inventory. So, and then the other great thing about my product is it doesn't really have a time frame, and it also is a very endurable fabric. So I can have things on my shelf there that have been there for like a year, 2, 3 years. I mean, you know, they don't stay that long, but they could. So I have an inventory, I would say now, of at least 400 pillows, 450 pillows in my office. What?
That's a lot of pillows.
Yeah, and one of the successes for me with interior designers is that I have this beautiful PDF. I mean, anybody can go to my website and go to the trade and, you know, on the bottom tab and go to the link to my inventory, and you'll see all the things that I have in stock at the moment in my studio. And, you know, and I have a color library of I don't know how many colors and different styles. So that has really helped my business model to have an inventory, but it's not, you know, I mean, it's dangerous, but it's not, for me, it's not that dangerous, you know.
And I think inventory works for certain products. Like, you have to have inventory for certain products, because if you think about it, there are certain things we're just not going to wait for. And so understanding, you know, pillows definitely is an item that, you know, you would have in stock. But then while you're designing rugs, that could be made to order.
Right.
You know, they would wait for that. And even if it's a custom wall covering, they would wait for that.
But people do a lot of custom pillows too.
And people, and you also do custom pillows as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll wait 3 months for the pillows. They're fine.
Yeah, and I think that's good to know, because there is a myth that if I have a custom order business, that no, it's not going to work. People aren't going to wait. But I think now, with the change of the environment, economy-wise, since like 2009, 8, people are willing to wait because things have changed. So if made-to-order business model is like the way for you to get started, just go for it, right? Because if that's how you're going to get it going, that, you know, just do it. And then eventually, if the inventory model is something that you desire, you could build up to it. So now that you have your products, you have your distribution channels, you're ready to go. Now, how are you marketing it? Because, you know, again, we have these dream clients, and we have these stores that we want to sell to, or designers we want to work with, or even, you know, retailers that we want to work with. But again, you know, we can't design in a vacuum, meaning that just sitting at home thinking that someone's going to find us. And it happens, but I still think even though they may find us from our social media accounts or website, that is part of the marketing. So, Vicki, you talked about Pinterest, and you have a Pinterest account, but how do you market yourself? Like, how do people know about your work?
Well, mainly I have an Instagram account, and I like Instagram because it kind of lets you like post a lot of work that you wouldn't necessarily put in your portfolio, but it's like process work that reminds people that you're still working and available to work for them. And it's just a good way to like share things with people who follow your work. That's pretty much the only one I have. I used to have a Tumblr that I kept up more, but I feel like things have kind of gone over to Instagram. Yeah, and I also have a website. And occasionally I'll send out like postcards for illustrators that they say that's important. I try to do it like maybe like twice a year. And I have gotten like response from that. So I should probably do it more.
So you do a mailer. You do a mailer.
Yeah.
Okay. And right now, mail is really good, because now when we get a piece of mail, we're like, oh my gosh, it's mail. It's not an email. So I would, especially if us creatives, you know, to create a nice piece of artwork and put it in a mail to someone that you potentially want to work with, or just to say, hey, it's a great way to market yourself.
Yeah, I also work as like a book cover designer, so I'm like starting to get mailers from Illustrators, and it definitely does make a difference, because if you get an email, it's easy to kind of like, it just gets buried in your inbox and you forget about it. But like having a physical thing there that you pin up where you can save for later is helpful. So yeah, I recommend that.
So now, Jen, you have an extensive Instagram account, like a serious following. She's sitting here quiet, but she has a serious following. So you have to tell us your secrets now.
Honestly, I think I started more at the beginning of the boom, because I started doing the painting a day 5 years ago, and pretty much as soon as I started that, my following went up. I think that there weren't as many people doing that at the time, so it was just good timing.
Timing.
Yeah.
So you found that because you show more process, you talk about your process, people are interested in that, and that's why it's one of the ways how you're marketing your services, by actually showing your process.
Right. I try to do, I'm going to start again. I've been very busy in the last year or so. I didn't do too many process, but I'm okay again, so I'm going to start. Yes, I try to do, time-lapse videos. For the first time, I did Instagram Live to see how that went. And it went okay.
Yeah,
I thought it went okay, except for the top of my head for a little while. But yeah, so that's helpful. I think people are always asking me, what sketchbook do you use, what paintbrushes, what paint. So I try to answer. It's hard to answer everybody, but I think I'll be doing more of the Instagram Live to answer questions. And I also teach some classes on Creative Bug, and I do workshops once in a while.
Oh, those are all great ways to market. Those are all great ways to market. Because I think one of the challenges as a creative of any sort is talking about your work, and putting yourself out there. And, to diversify the ways that we're sharing our work, it's only going to enhance our visibility and then potentially our businesses. So, yeah. Judy, what are some of the ways that you've been marketing? Because you've gone through the whole change of how we market, because when you started, internet was not a thing. And, how did you start and then, change with the environment that has become so digital? Maybe she's like, I'm still figuring it out, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm like a girl from the 80s, and I've got all my tried and true followers, and oh yeah, we know your work, kind of. But yeah, my Instagram, I enjoy doing it. It's not. I don't have a million. I don't have
and I think that's
I don't have tons of followers.
Let me
what
speak
do I have,
for
3,000?
Judy is not really saying. Judy's work is constantly in movie sets. It's in commercials.
Yeah. Somebody just told me it's in Frankie and Grace, and it's a whole episode, and they're fighting over my pillows.
You see?
Which I haven't seen it yet. Did you see it? No. But somebody just told me, Judy.
You see, Judy, because Judy, you have been in the business for so long, right? You have planted many seeds. And I think what people have to understand is that you constantly have to plant those seeds. You've planted seeds with stylists, with designers in 3 different areas: the wholesale, the retail, and with the trade. And so there's a lot of seeds planted. And so they've grown over the years. And granted, it's great because you're at that point where, people know your work, So maybe Instagram is not your thing because you've planted the seeds. But I think it's very key for people to understand when you're starting out, you have to plant those seeds and not only rely on Instagram or Pinterest.
Yeah.
It is also about building those relationships. And you have that. And I think that's important to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I remember, what was that movie, She? Do you remember that movie, She? With, where he's dating the robot? And her. And so I was watching that. So I went to see that with my son, and we were sitting like in the second row because we got there really late, and it was a popular movie. And all of a sudden we're sitting there, and there are like 2 of my pillows on the couch with, the 2 main actors and actresses hugging them. And my son, they're like, Mom, your pillows. And this happens all the time. So yeah, I mean, but every once in a while I do have the aspiration of having 10,000 followers, but I'm not sure I'm going to get there. I don't know.
And that's okay. That's okay. So, and Jill, I want to hear about some of your marketing strategies and what has been successful.
I think when I first started out, I relied on blogs, and I tried to develop relationships with editors and magazines. And I still go through those channels, but I'm reverting back more to a grassroots method where I literally knock on doors again, and I meet, I have relationships now with a lot of designers, and I'm constantly meeting with them face to face because I think that contact, that face-to-face contact, is so key.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's like
so,
a piece of mail, right? These days.
yeah.
Actually, there was a company I wanted to work with, and we weren't getting anywhere. So I called her up and I said, I would love to just come and show you my sketchbooks in person. And she said, great. So I went in and we just talked for an hour and she looked through them. And then nothing happened. And about a year later, she called and said, let's do this project. So I think the face-to-face is key. It's really important. So as much as you can do that.
No, I agree. I agree. Because it makes, if you think about it, when you meet people in person, there's a different connection versus receiving an email or seeing them on Instagram. It's very true. That's true. So now we're getting close to the end of our conversation. We talked about how we're our source of inspiration for the design. We talked about how we're manufacturing, distribution, and marketing. And I think one big mystery, like what a lot of people have a challenge with, how do you finance these ideas? You have these ideas and it's like, well, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this. But then when you look at your bank account, you're like, well, it's just not going to happen. So, but I do believe that there are creative ways where we could finance our ideas. And again, anyone want to start and share a creative way, understanding that I have this painting and I want to make it into a fabric. What would you do?
Well, I mean, I still think things like this can happen and do, but at the time when I started working, I asked my vendors, hey, will you give me time to pay for things? And I remember in the very beginning, my guys would give me 3 months, 6 months to pay for things. And I don't think that that's a bad thing to ask. If I'm going to work with you and I'm going to, risk doing this, can you meet me part way and stuff like that? And then the idea that if you do things more custom, then maybe you have like a handful of things that you can sell and maybe you get some time on it, and work it that way. That's one.
That's a great way because a lot of people think, oh, I have this manufacturer and now I have to come up with all this money. And like you said, it's about asking for what you need and allowing them to decide whether they want to do it or not. But, oh, I have this manufacturer and now I have to come up with all this money. And like you said, it's about asking for what you need and allowing them to decide whether they want to do it or not. But don't be afraid to ask, is what you're saying. Jen?
It's not so much of an issue for me because I'm not laying out the money to do it. I did do a small scarf line last spring on my own that I manufactured in China. And so I did have to lay out a few $1,000s. I just risked it. I wanted to try, but I realized that I hated the selling part so much that I really am not going to do that again. Although I loved the product. It was beautiful. So.
Okay, so basically you took the risk.
Yeah, I did.
You decided to say, hey, I have a few $1,000.
Right,
Just spend it
right.
and see what happens.
And I made my money back, so
Okay.
it was worth it in the end. And it was fun to have it.
I was just going to say, I mean, for me, I always say, oh God, I'm an artist. I can't take the selling part. But, I just buckle up and put on a smiley face and just really, through the years, it's gotten easier and easier, but I don't think any artist likes to sell their work, and, I totally have your sentiment, but, after you start doing trade shows and you love your work, you kind of learn how to just, suck it up.
Well, it's really not expensive to do what I do, I guess, since I work mostly with like a very limited palette. So, you could probably afford like 1 tube of watercolor and a pad of paper. I use Strathmore 400 series, the drawing paper. I find that it's like student grade, but that's what I do all my work on. So it really doesn't cost that much. this isn't creative. I have a full-time job too, which I think like allows me to be more creative with my own work and kind of like call the shots and not really have to listen.
But that's part of it then, Vicki,
Yeah.
is, you know, sometimes that's what we have to do is have the full-time job to help fund the ideas. And that's okay too.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
So you work from 9 to 5 and then you come home on the weekends?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did that in the beginning.
Yeah.
I want to say that I really think that sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to have the right supplies and what paper is it and is the paint good enough and is my paintbrush. But you can go, my first sketchbook was one of those cheap ones from Muji. I think it was $4.95. $4.95, and it was 300 pieces of paper, and it's like really cheap paper. But I use gouache, so I paint thick, so it didn't ruin the paper, and it was fine. It was great. And then sometimes a junky old paintbrush makes a great texture. So you really don't have. I mean, it's coming from yourself, and it's not about the materials.
I just bought some Series 7 Winsor Newton brushes, though. I treated myself. But they were on sale, like for 20% off at Blink, whatever. So, you know, I don't even think somebody told me they were stopping making those because I don't know, but yeah. But yeah. Yeah. But still, like you can use a sponge. I mean, things are great.
And Jill?
I think there are a couple things I was thinking for people starting out. One, you know, there are so many digital capabilities these days where you don't need to, like for wall covering, what I do, when I create digital wall coverings, I don't need to put the upfront cost for plates and for screen engraving and all those things. You could get very affordable, quick samples very easily. So that's one way to do it. And you could also just have a portfolio of your work where you have your patterns or your artwork, and you could make ideas for different applications for them. And it's a way to just put yourself out there and maybe send your websites to certain people that you want to work with. And then another way, when I started, I just got an advance, you know, a cash advance, and I just went for it. So it's okay also to just put down money if it's a product that you believe in. It's okay to spend money, even if you don't have it. I didn't have it, and it worked itself out.
Yeah. I truly believe in starting with what you have and make it work, and then grow and keep adding on to it. Work with what you can afford, and that's okay.
Also, something that you do, I do, I mean, I'm sure we all do, is, you know, you can take your work and Photoshop it into a situation. Okay. And more people do that too. This way, you know, somebody can even think that you did do that rug in that room, but
that's right.
Didn't really, you know,
Software
I mean,
is amazing.
Yeah. So, and, you know, it's just to give them that idea. It doesn't really matter if you did, I mean, everybody does it, you know. It's like part of it.
So before we get to question and answers, I want to ask the panel the one thing that the audience could do to get started with turning their art or idea into a product. What's the one thing you would advise? And it could be any. It could be from any of the categories we talked about, or, you know, nothing we talked about. Well, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them? Jen, you want to start? She's like, nope. Judy?
I'm not sure I'm answering it right, but I would just say do something that you want for yourself. You know, if you want a beautiful pillow design and you can paint it on a fabric and have somebody make it for you, make that, and then you could photograph it, you could Instagram it, you could put it out there, and you know, I mean, feedback and just even having other people see it. You never know. I mean, I went with my son and we did some watercolors and at this place in Merida, and I showed it to the people who we were renting the place, and he's like, I want to buy that. And I thought, oh my God. I was like, Gabrielle, you just sold a piece. And I said, well, why don't we do a trade with him? He's an artist. But I think you just, you know, people respond, and doing it for yourself is like an easy way to start.
Yeah. A lot of businesses have started that way, by people creating things that they didn't have, and that's what they wanted for themselves. So yeah.
Right. So I don't know if this pertains to getting stuff on a product, but just do a lot of work. Do work that you really want to be doing. That makes you happy to do it.
That's great advice.
I agree with what she just said. Also, I want to add, like, to think about like whatever surface you're designing for, like what makes it special, like whether it's the size or the shape or even the texture. I think that the parameters of whatever object you're working on are really opportunities to be creative. So that's it.
I think a good thing to do when you're starting out is try and network as much as possible and integrate with your community. Because as artists and designers, even myself, it's so easy to curl into yourself and isolate yourself from other people. And I think the more you put yourself out there and talk to people and understand what they're doing so they can understand what you're doing, it's really going to help you.
Very true, very true. You know how much I love to network. So I agree with that. So thank you. So now I'm going to open the audience for question and answers.
I'm going to try to get one out.
Yeah, this one's going out. Yeah, it keeps going in and out, I notice. Yeah. Okay, so I'm sure everyone has a question, and I want to see those hands go up. So Eliza's going to go around and pass the mic. So just say your name and your question, and we'll figure out who's best going to answer it for you.
Sure, this is Judy.
Okay.
I think it's very important to have good questions.
For your best, like what line or what medium.
So the question is, how do you find your style as an artist, right? Oh, and by the way, you said you do digital marketing for luxury brands. You need to talk to me, Jill, and Judy after. Just saying. So, but the question is, again, as an artist, how do you find your style? Because you see on Instagram that people are very consistent with their style, and you want to know, you feel that you're all over the place, and something is style. Yeah. So, Jen, do you think you want to answer that, or Vicki? Because you both have a very distinct style when it comes to illustrating.
So, all my years in textiles, which was a long time, when I first, after college and when I first started, what you do is learn how to use gouache, right? So I don't know if any of you have been in that, maybe you. So we learned how to. We use lumidized too, but I use gouache a lot, mostly. So I did that, and I really learned how to do it in a more technical kind of way. And then over the years, I was styling and putting lines together, and I didn't paint at all for many, many, many years. I didn't do anything. So when it came back to the time where I'm ready to paint again or draw or do something, I did digital work, and then I did all different kinds of artwork, and I never loved it that much. And then one day I picked up gouache again, and I said, oh, wow, this is what I know, right? So, and then I said, but I don't like the way I did it way back in 1985, when we had to do it, there were 6 colors so that they could cut the screens. And
Yep.
I didn't want to do it that way anymore. I love being really loose and intuitive. So it took a long time to figure out where my passion really was. So, and I knew, I remember saying things to my mom when I was really young that I'm really intuitive. I really don't like to be precise. So I realized that's my thing. So now I went with it. But it takes, I don't think you discover that in a minute. And that's what I mean by working all the time.
Yes.
That's what the painting a day thing has helped invaluably, because I sort of figured it out. And I still make things that I think are hideous. So, it's, but it's just a trial and error. And sometimes I'll do a painting and I see one little corner. And I say, well, I'm going to take work from that corner and expand that, or I love those colors, or look what happened with that mark. So that's the way it works, I think.
And just to add, I think if you just let go of trying to figure out the style and just paint.
Yeah,
just draw.
Do it. Just do it.
The style will come on its own,
Right.
but it's just keep doing like Jen says. I mean, even myself, I'm in the transition of doing art, and I'm not tied to any medium, and I'm not tied to a style because I have so many. Just draw what you like, paint what you like.
Yeah. Right. I mean, if you like doing faces, do faces, and just draw, paint, whatever.
Yeah.
He's into women right now.
Yes, I am. Women around the world, reunited. Okay. Okay. Oh, there's no mic anymore, right? Oh, so, right. Oh, there's no mic. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. And I'll repeat the question. So go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you ladies so much. It was really, really interesting to hear.
So is your question, do you need inventory to do a trade show? Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the question.
That's
Do you need inventory to participate in a trade show? And I'll answer very quickly, no. The answer is no. You don't have to have any inventory. But ladies, if you want to, concur, disagree, but no, you don't need to have any inventory. You just need to have samples.
I think it also depends on the
Products.
Yeah.
Like to do the home thing. I mean, I can have
So,
samples of tissue boxes.
Okay, so for example, like Judy said something very key with working with her manufacturers, right? She said, I need like 3 months to pay, right? So it's the same thing, like if you're doing a show, right, and say the show is coming up for, is right now, the fall, winter market, which is actually, they're selling for next fall, okay? So basically you have about 6 months to deliver the goods. You could take the orders now, and you could place your order based on the orders from the show. So you have to tell your potential client you're gonna get your goods in 3 months, 6 months, however long the manufacturing is. So you really don't have to have inventory, but you have to understand and have your manufacturing in place in order to fulfill the orders.
But I guess so. Then the question is, but it's just me.
Okay.
I'm like making the trays, and I don't want anybody else like putting the topping on them. And
okay.
And,
so then you have to create your own timeline, your own production time. So Jill, for example, how long does it take to make wallpaper? Is it 4 to 6 weeks? Is it 3 to 4 weeks to have it printed?
Well, some printers
Yeah.
can take forever.
Yeah, we know that.
I have one printer that can do it. They're in upstate New York. If I rush them, they can do it in a week for me.
Okay, 1 week production time.
But I would say on average it's 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks.
2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Now my production time is 8 to 12 weeks. Okay, so it depends on the product, but see, this is what is built in. So when they're ordering from me, they know they have to wait at least 2 to 3 months before they're going to get it. Sometimes it's longer, but that's not my fault. It's because they didn't make their decisions. But if you're making one of a kind and you're doing the work, all you have to do is say, hey, you want this? It's going to take 4 months, whatever it is for you. But you want to create a comfortable production time so you know that you're able to fulfill it. Sure. Well,
because the hard thing is actually finding the trays. I mean, I get them on like eBay and from it.
Well, Judy, I think because you have a vast variety of product, would you suggest you start with the one product or two and then you grow? Like, did you start with everything when you came out at a trade show, or was it just the scarves and the pillows? Or was
but I think like when you do a trade show, like you were saying, I mean, you can have this opportunity where you could make samples of all these different things and just see what resonates with the customers, and you could maybe have a bedspread, you could have some pillows, you could have, make a whole environment, and, you might have Anthropologie or somebody come in and say, we want, 300 of those, or we want to make that. We're going to pay you money to, yeah. So, or you might have a store that just says, I want 10 of them. And then you can decide after the show, it's not even worth it to make those 10. And you can just have a nice excuse or something.
Exactly.
So it's a good, you can just try it out.
Yeah. Question right here, lady in red.
Yeah, how do you know you're getting a good deal?
It's very difficult, actually. The pricing is hard, and that's why I do have an agent, because I let her negotiate all that. But I do know that she, one thing she does do is whatever they say, she comes back and says, but what about, this? So a lot of times they'll go up. So you have to not be afraid to try.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what Jill said in the beginning with asking and having a network of people in your business so you could ask. You know, I call on Judy, Jill calls on me, you know, to say, hey, I'm getting this price, or what do you think of this? How much should I charge? She did it the other day. So, you know, that's one of the ways you could kind of see if you're getting, you know, lowballed or not.
There's also like Facebook groups of people, you know, all that, and you can just ask in there. Some people have already been through it.
You do it because you want to do it and you just love it. And
exactly.
Right. Once you have something done, maybe the next time is
right here. Look, for sure. The question is, how do you copyright your designs, or how do you protect your designs?
I'm going to say that I do not copyright everything because I have way too much stuff. And I sort of take this attitude that I'm just going to make more, and I'm moving on, and I'm going to, but if someone steals it, we're going to send a cease and desist and call them out and make a Instagram campaign or something. I don't know.
Yes, because that's very powerful these days too. Well, this is one of the things I think as creatives, that when you're creating, you should create something that you feel that is like, you know what, this is very unique to me. There are certain designs that are not yours. You cannot own a polka dot. You cannot own a stripe. So just forget it. There are certain designs, and you have to understand that. So that's part of what your job is as a creator, is if you really want to get in the business, think about those icons that are unique to you and your business. Right here. So how many mailers did you send out, right? Okay. What was the budget, and what was the third? How long you been in the business?
Okay, so how many mailers, like per year or at a time? Oh, you mean like to how many clients?
Yeah, or potential clients.
Okay, usually I'll order them online. Like, I think the last place I used was like Vistaprint. I mean, I think they're pretty decent. The quality and like the price really like are a good balance with them. I probably will send out like a batch of 50. For me, that's a lot because like I write them all out like by hand. And I think like I've heard like doing it like maybe 3 or 4 times a year is pretty good, just to, you know, remind people that you're still there. And you asked like my budget for mailers or like promotional materials. Well, it's, I mean, they have like coupons and stuff online that you can find. They have like really good deals, and yeah, everything. Like I don't have them send them out. Like I just order them for myself. I'll write the addresses out and address them myself and mail them all out. And I think does that answer your question? How long have you been doing it? I actually, I was lucky. I got my first job like right after I graduated, but it was something like at the time I was doing more like editorial work. I feel like when you're in school, they kind of put an emphasis, I don't know about now, but like when I was in school, they put an emphasis on like more editorial stuff and like communicating like in a certain way. And I feel like things like surface design, they communicate in a different way. And I'm glad to see that, like, you know, it's now a category here, and I see like students graduating who are focusing on it. I think what really, the transition point for me was a book with Chronicle called Eat Pretty, because they kind of like had me just do a pattern for like the book cover. And that was the point where like, while it's not an object, it's a book, it kind of made me realize that like I could transition into this. And they do a lot of like really beautiful stationery and paper goods. So I kind of like got into that. And that was probably about, I don't know, like 4 years ago. So, you know, I kind of like spent 4 years not really knowing where my direction was. And then I kind of had like an aha moment, and things started to change from there. And like my work sort of took a turning point. I haven't sent one out like recently, but I am. I think I sent one out like probably last summer. So it's not too bad. Yeah. Yeah.
The black hat lady. Yeah. Okay. Okay, hold on. So the question is, how does Jennifer balance her personal work versus her work that she's going to license? Okay.
Right.
And how does the idea come together? How do you put it together?
It's honestly a complicated question because when I started out, I said to myself, I don't want to just do work that's meant for licensing. I don't want to just do Christmas and Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and things like that. I'm not interested in designing for themes like that. So my sketchbook is the stuff I license pretty much, unless someone commissions me particularly. So I do a lot of flowers because I love to paint flowers. So that will work for Mother's Day. Or I tend to not design for, all right, wait, I'm trying to think of how to say this. For instance, my agent will send an email to all of us who are in her group and say, clients are looking for, foxes, hearts, whatever, Christmas and whatever things. And I pretty much ignore that. And but if foxes are in it, I might, somewhere in the back of my mind, I say, oh, it might be fun to do some kind of woodland painting today because I feel like it. And then I'll do that. So it sort of might blend into where someone wants it specifically, but I just want to do what I want to do. If I have to do what they're telling me to do, it's not going to be fun anymore, and I'm not interested, and I'd rather not do it. So,
yeah.
She's an artist.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean.
Question in the back, lady in the red hat.
Yeah.
So we want to know about licensing advances, royalties.
Yeah,
Give us the dirt.
So there's all different ways. I actually brought a few things so I can show you. There's all different ways to do it. Someone could buy it straight out and pay you $1,000 for the artwork, and you're done. That's one way. They might just license it, and you get a royalty, whatever. It might be 8% or 10% of all their sales. I think it's on wholesale, probably. I can't remember. Yeah. One of the really great ways is when you do a buyout of or a license for just a product. So, for instance, with this Kate Spade, this one pattern got onto 1 million things. So they did 1 million different size notebooks. These are calendars. So they took the print, and I got paid royalties for, they don't pay me royalties, but they paid me a sum for stationery or for these kind of books. Then I got another fee for the tumblers. Then I got another fee for the bags. And they did bedding and glasses and stationery and all different things. So that's an amazing way to do it because then it can go on forever. So all this was just one painting in my sketchbook. So
Do you have a choice of doing advance versus royalty?
a lot of the clients they'll work a certain way. Not every client will work that way. So that, some...
So this isn't really a royalty.
I'm not getting royalties. So they're really making more money than I'm making on it, but I got paid well for this. So...
And then you're done.
And I'm done, right? I'm done. Yeah. So right. So then, for instance, this was a print that went. This is with Tenoise. It's a card set. I think it's 5 different. You could see it after. It's 4 different paintings. They took them. This one was. They paid me a flat fee to put on stationery. So I can take these prints and I can sell them for fabric or tea towels or ceramics. So it's not, I didn't sell out my copyright or anything. These are some tea towels. We can open them later, but this client is Tag. They do like boutiques, home goods. And These ones, they just pay a flat fee and they buy the design and they put it on whatever they want.
It's made in India.
And it's made in India. So, yeah, so is there another way? Those are the ways. So,
I think those days are over, don't
yeah, right now, we try to get, if it's something that's going to be just a royalty, so I'm going to get 8% somewhere down the road, we try to get an upfront fee of like $250 just so they're like in it. We want them to be in the game, right? So they won't all pay that, but we try and then get royalties above that. But a lot of times, I have to say that licensing always doesn't pan out because you might say, great, I'm getting 8%, and then they don't sell anything.
Yeah.
So you end up making, $30 on your thing. So sometimes, I know a lot of people think licensing is the only way to go, but sometimes, that $1,000 in your pocket is worth a lot.
Yes, it is. Did you have a question? Go ahead, I know you were saying.
I'm interested in licensing as well. That might be helpful.
So any suggestions relating to licensing your art and design, as far as books, podcasts, blogs? Anyone want to answer?
Or any design ones that you like, even if it's not licensed.
Are you, well, let me ask you a question. What are you looking for specifically? What's the information that you're looking for?
Any information about licensing.
No. Let's get specific. Okay. Meaning, do you have designs already that you want? So you have a portfolio. So what do you need help on? Finding an agent? Do you want an agent?
I don't particularly want an agent.
Okay.
Although it's exciting to hear you talk about it.
Okay.
More so like sort of how to reach out to the art directors, how to even find the art directors of the companies you want to work with.
Okay, so then this is, that's a little different.
Sorry, extended.
But that's not even about a blog or a website. So have you made a list of the companies you want to work with?
I mean, get started, yeah.
Okay, so you make your list, right? So now all of those companies have a website. All of them have LinkedIn pages, the people who work there. So go to LinkedIn, put in, the company, who's the art director. Get the name. See if their email address is there. If it's not, pick up the phone. Call the company. I'm trying to get in touch with so-and-so. I'm an artist, blah, blah, blah. Ask them for the email address. You don't need a blog or website for that, specific. So that's why I want to know more about what is it that you need that we could give you specific. So we answered that. Just make your list.
I mean, I'm not trying to be, not that it's a long shot, but I think it's hard getting licensing through sending email information and stuff. I would think there are these, I don't know exactly, there are these licensing shows I know.
It moved out to Vegas.
You could.
You can go for fabric. You can go to there's Print Source and Blueprint and Surtex.
Yeah, not the licensing show.
You could form a collective with some other artists, so you're together at a booth, so you don't have to spend as much money, and you have people to work with and talk to.
I'm sorry. Do you know if I don't even know if it still exists? The Graphic Artists Guild, their book on pricing guide.
I think there's a new one coming out this spring, actually.
Because they always had a section in there for surface design, talked about pricing. The Graphic Artists Guild pricing guide to ethical pricing, something like that. The Graphic Artists Guild book on pricing and ethical guide to something. It's something like that. But I know it was the Graphic Artists Guild who put out a book every year or so, and it was all about pricing for different industries in the arts. And I know surface design was one of the categories in there. And they would tell you the range of what the average rates per design, apparel versus home, royalty rates and everything. Yeah. And Judy had mentioned there is a licensing show. Like, it's called the Licensing Show. It's in Vegas now, but it's no longer in New York. But that is licensing across many categories versus Surtex, which is what Jen is talking about, which is strictly, surface design. And I'm sorry, Judy, what do you say?
I don't know if you could get into a group booth in that licensing show, but also, it depends on your finances and all that, but you could go out there with your work
Yes.
and just, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
bump into somebody and just say, you know, oh yeah, just like, oh my God. You know, I mean, sometimes just going to that show and seeing what other people are doing, you know, you might come across somebody that's got a group booth with 10 people in it, and you could say, can I do the next show with you?
Yeah.
You know, or you can even, you know, you walk around and like the anthropology bunch or like, you know, 30 of them, and you could all of a sudden be right behind them and just really be upfront and nice and introduce
and I also,
yourself.
When I'm suggesting like use LinkedIn as a source, the resources, you want to get the names of the people and you want to start following them. Like they could be speaking at an event and you could go introduce yourself. So that's why it's key to know who the people are, and not just on LinkedIn. Go to their Instagram, go to their Facebook, see what they're up to. Even the company may sponsor an event, and you go to that event and find out, hey, is so-and-so here? I'd like to meet, you know, whoever it is. So, but this is how you network. But this is how you do it. So
I mean, isn't it coming up? I mean, New York Now is coming up. And you're going to see people there that are going to have products that anthropology or different people
the
are,
buyers will be there.
Are, you know, like they'll probably have it in their booth. They'll have a picture. I did this or that. You know, and people are nice. You could say, look, I'm starting out, you know, I mean, can I talk to you one time? Or, you know, and again, these people are all at the show. You can,
Yeah. All right. More questions. Right here. Go ahead. So the first question is, Judy and Jill, you want the question directed to. Do you use trend forecasting to direct or dictate your next collection? So Jill, you have the mic, and then go to Judy.
I think it's very important to stay abreast of trends. It's good to know what's going on. Me personally, I don't tend to follow them. I strive to make designs that are not going to go out of style in a year or two. And I don't really design within those confines. For my kids' collection, on the other hand, you know, I'm working with interior designers, and they are very up on trends all the time, and they know what's going to sell right away. And a lot of times, I do find myself designing within those parameters. So again, I think it's important to be clued into it, but I wouldn't necessarily limit yourself to that.
Yeah.
well, I would say coming from, you know, when I went to school and I was sort of at FIT and fashion and textiles, and also just my own thing. I mean, I love fashion and I look at fashion. So for me, you know, I'm always on the pulse of, oh my God, Dries Van Noten, he's doing, you know, that burgundy with the gold lurex, oh my, you know, or things like that. That, I mean, I also love Erez, and, you know, they have great bathing suit and underwear campaigns, and they always pick. And there's also, I don't know what it is, but I think, you know, I'm not saying I'm part of that whole thing, but there's things in the air that just kind of, all of a sudden you're like, yellow, and then you look in fashion and yellow's there, and Dries is doing yellow, and Erez has yellow, and you're like, where did I come up with that? But, you know, there's like things like that come up, you know, like yellow is definitely a big color for me right now, you know, and you know, so I think fashion and art, everything.
And you had one more question? What's the other? So what's the process behind growing your product?
Right.
You know, variation on products. What's the process?
Well, I think, you know, like I said, I started with the scarves, and then, you know, I decided I didn't want to be a scarf designer, and the whole, you know, retail, I mean, the whole kind of garment center momentum was just too much for me, like 4 seasons, you know, resort and spring and summer. And then, you know, home just seems much calmer. I mean, also, I have designs that I did in 2004 that I'm still selling, like, to this day. And nobody says, that one again? You know, they just, they know them by name. Oh, Fauna, I like Fauna. And so, but it started with pillows, and then it was just a natural progression, like, okay, rugs, okay, curtains, you know, and sometimes somebody will come to you and say, look, I love that pillow, but I want a bed cover now. And then all of a sudden I was doing bed covers. So, you know, it can just happen organically, you know.
Question here, because I know we're running out of time. Right here, go ahead, yeah. Okay, so the question is, how do you find the right manufacturers to make your products to get it at the proper cost so you could sell it, right? That's really what your question is. So I think what it is, the first thing you have to do is you really got to start sourcing some other manufacturers. So is it the issue of trying to find other digital fabric printers that you're using? Because there are a lot of digital fabric printers out there now.
Right, and then a lot of them are asking for volume. Like they're not gonna make it unless.
Then those are the wrong partners for you. Those are the wrong partners for you. So are you focusing only on in New York?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not problem number one too. Because listen, you got to understand the cost of living in New York is quite high. So the businesses here, they have to charge according to the living, you know, expenses here. So it'd be better if you start to source, look outside, look down south. You know, look up north.
Digital printing, you know, there are all those digital printing places. You know, you could email me too.
Yeah, there are a lot. There are a lot because because it's not gonna make any sense to spend $100+ on the pillow if you can't sell it for like $200 or $300. It's just not gonna make any sense.
Yeah, somebody came to me once and asked me about that. He was doing that, and he ended up, Judy, telling these,
you know, again, that website, there's a couple of websites where they'll even make the pillow for you.
Yeah,
they'll make the whole thing. And depending on how many you make, the price structure goes up or down, you know, so.
Yeah. Anybody else want to chime on that, Jill? Any thoughts on that? She needs to find a new manufacturer, right?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And I think your idea of going down south is great.
Okay, yeah, it's cost of living. Great. Well, I need to wrap it up.
Show her designs that she brought.
Oh, sure. And
Sure. I asked Malene if I should.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sure.
Well, I'll just to show you how back in the day, I mean, I still do it this way, but like, you know, for instance, here's, you know, this is my choice medium, so I'm like about pen and ink, and then this is the design, the final design. And you know, he does catch some of the brush strokes in it. This is called acrobat. And I mean, you can see also the way he did the stitching. You know, I didn't tell him, like, go wild with the stitching.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I love these guys, you know, these artisans. I mean, working with them, they, you know, take the work. And then this is another one just to show you. And again, this was a pen and ink. And you know, years ago, before there was Photoshop, I would just send them this. This is what they got, you know, 18 by 18. And, you know, but then as it got more, you know, we would scan that in, I would scan it in and send it to them over the internet.
Yeah.
This is another design. This actually came from, you know, they have those metal grids that are on trees. And you can actually see this design, and I kind of did my own version of it. And then this is a hand-knotted rug. So, and this was actually a design that was made from sequins, like a sequin top, and I just, you know, painted all the sequins, and then I took away parts of it. So it's actually from layers of sequins. This is another design, tabla, that was from a Japanese fabric, and again, like all these designs I'm showing you are all from like 2000 and you know, 8. I still do them. This is again the same design. So now this is a scarf that became a pillow. You know, became this pillow. So like that, and it's a rug also. And then this is something I did with Garnet Hill. This was a license, and this was one of my designs. And then, you know, it started out as a pillow, and then it was a rug, and this was a throw for Garnet Hill. So, you know, I would basically take the artwork back in, put it into the computer, and that's when I worked with, you know, the freelancers. And I would say, I want it like this, like that, and, you know, and we'd figure it out on the computer, you know. But it was my, you know, the scan drawing put in.
Yeah. So I want to thank everyone for coming out.